Listen carefully, because this might offend you. Being nice is not a virtue. It's a weakness that's been programmed into you. And deep down, you already know it. There's a voice in your head, quiet, polite, well-behaved. It tells you to keep the peace, not to upset anyone, to smile when you're frustrated, to say yes when every part of you wants to say no. You've been told that voice makes you a good person. But what if I told you it's the very thing destroying your life? Let me ask you something. How many times this week did you stay silent when you should have spoken? How many times did you agree just to avoid tension? How many times did you shrink just to be accepted? Exactly. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people will never admit. The world does not reward the agreeable, it exploits them. That good side of you. It's not protecting you. It's making you predictable, controllable, replaceable. And the worst part, it was installed in you before you even had a choice. From childhood, you were trained, rewarded for obedience, punished for defiance, shaped into someone easy to manage. Not powerful, not respected, just convenient. Right now, as you're listening to this, there's a part of you resisting, telling you this is too harsh, too negative, too extreme. That voice again, the same one that kept you quiet when someone disrespected you last week. The same one that told you it's fine when it clearly wasn't. The same one that watches other people take what they want, while you wait your turn like it's ever coming. But here's what changes everything. Today, you're going to see that voice for what it really is. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 10 ruthless lessons drawn from the kind of thinking Niccolò Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Not motivational fluff, not feel-good advice, real psychological leverage. The kind that changes how people look at you, how they speak to you, how they treat you. But I'll warn you now, most people won't make it to the end of this video, because the moment it starts to feel uncomfortable, they'll leave. They'll go back to being liked instead of being respected. So here's the question: are you ready to lose approval, to gain power? Because if you are, stay with me. Watch this properly. No distractions, no scrolling. Because buried in these lessons is the reason you've been overlooked, underestimated, and ignored for years. And more importantly, how that ends today. If you're still here, then you're not like most people. Number one, let's strip away the illusion and talk about what was really done to you, because none of this was accidental. You weren't just raised well, you were trained, conditioned, shaped into someone predictable. Think back, not in a nostalgic way, but clinically. Small chairs, bright walls, authority figures smiling while they corrected you. Don't interrupt. Wait your turn. Share. On the surface, harmless. Beneath it, something else was happening. You were being taught to override your instincts. Every time you felt the urge to take, to speak, to push, you were restrained. Not physically, but psychologically. And over time you learned something dangerous, that your natural impulses were wrong, and compliance was rewarded. Fast forward to now, nothing changed, only the environment did. You're in a meeting, you have the idea, you know it's strong, but you hesitate. Someone louder cuts in, takes space, owns the room, and you tell yourself, I'll speak next. You don't. You wait, you analyze, you soften your tone, and by the time you open your mouth, the moment is gone. Then later, someone else repeats your idea, slightly sharper, slightly more confident, and suddenly it's theirs. You feel it in your chest, that quiet frustration, that heat, but you swallow it. Again. This is where most men lie to themselves. They call it maturity, discipline, emotional intelligence. It's not. It's obedience, dressed up to look like virtue, and the world knows it. People can feel it on you before you even speak, that you won't push back, that you'll tolerate, that you'll adjust. And once they sense that, the dynamic is set. You don't negotiate from strength. You negotiate from permission. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it softer names. He saw people as they are, not as they pretend to be. Appear harmless, and you will be treated as harmless. And harmless men are not respected, they are managed. Watch closely next time you're in any power environment. A boardroom, a social circle, even a simple group conversation. The man who controls the room is rarely the most polite. He interrupts without apology, holds eye contact a second too long, speaks as if what he says carries weight, because to him it does. There's no internal negotiation happening. No silent question of, is this okay? He assumes it is, and everyone else adjusts. Now contrast that with the man who was conditioned. He filters everything. Tone, timing, wording, reaction. He edits himself in real time, constantly calibrating to avoid friction. And while he's doing that, someone else is taking ground, not because they're smarter, not because they're better, but because they're not restrained by the same invisible leash. Think about yesterday, but don't skim over it. Replay it properly. That moment you laughed at something that wasn't funny. That moment you agreed just to keep things smooth. That message you replied to when you didn't feel like it. That invitation you accepted out of obligation. Each one seems small, almost irrelevant, but stacked together, they form a pattern of self-betrayal. And here's the part that hits harder than most people expect. Every time you ignore that internal signal, every time you choose comfort over truth, you weaken your own authority. Not in the eyes of others first, but in your own mind. You start trusting yourself less. You hesitate more. You second-guess decisions you would have made instantly years ago. That's how control deepens. Not through force, but through repetition. The leash isn't visible, but you feel it every time you hold back. And the longer you wear it, the more normal it feels. Until one day you don't even recognize the man you could have been without it. That's the shift. The moment you stop calling it being nice and start calling it what it is: conditioning, control, limitation. Because once you see the cage clearly, you can't pretend you're free anymore. Number 2. Let's cut through another lie you've been fed your entire life. The idea that people are genuinely rooting for you. They're not, at least not in the way you think. And if that hits something in you good, it should. Because most men walk around with this quiet expectation that the people closest to them want to see them win. That loyalty is natural. That support is automatic. It isn't. It never was. You've seen it before, you just didn't want to name it. That moment when you share something big, a promotion, a new opportunity, a shift in your life. They smile, they nod, they say the right words, but there's a delay, a fraction of a second, where something else shows up before the mask settles in. It's subtle, almost invisible if you're not paying attention, but it's there. A tightening around the eyes, a slight pause, a recalibration. That's the real reaction. Not the words, the flicker. And once you see it once, you start seeing it everywhere. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You felt it too. Someone else wins, and before you catch yourself, there's that same internal question. Why them? Not me. You suppress it, of course. You dress it up as motivation, or you ignore it completely. But it's there. Which means this isn't about bad people. It's about human nature. Competition is wired into you. Comparison is automatic. Desire is triggered by what others have, not just by what you need. And pretending you're above that is exactly what keeps you blind to it in others. Think about your environment, not in theory, but in specifics. That colleague who jokes with you, shares coffee breaks, asks about your weekend, is the same one who mentions your lack of assertiveness when you're not in the room. Not because they hate you, but because positioning themselves slightly above you benefits them. That family member who gives you advice, who tells you to be careful, to not rush things. Sounds supportive on the surface, but underneath, there's something else. Comfort in seeing you stay where you are, because your growth forces them to confront their stagnation. And then there's the one that's harder to admit. The friend who forgot to invite you. You told yourself it was an accident. It wasn't. It was a choice that didn't include you. Not dramatic, not malicious, just honest in a way people rarely are out loud. You weren't useful in that moment. You didn't fit the dynamic they wanted, so you were left out. Simple as that. This isn't pessimism. It's clarity. And clarity changes how you move. You stop oversharing your plans with people who haven't earned access to them. You stop expecting loyalty from those who benefit from your stagnation. You start noticing patterns instead of excuses. And most importantly, you stop taking it personally. Because it was never about you in the first place. It's about their internal hierarchy, their insecurities, their constant calculation of where they stand and where you stand in relation to them. Once that clicks, your behavior shifts without effort. You become quieter about your moves, but more precise. You stop announcing intentions and start delivering outcomes. You let results speak in a way words never could, and you begin to understand something most people never articulate. Loyalty is not given, it's engineered. People don't stay loyal because they like you. They stay loyal because it serves them to do so. I'm not telling you everyone is against you. That's too simplistic. What I'm telling you is this: everyone is for themselves first. Always. And the men who understand that operate with a completely different level of awareness. They're not surprised, not blindsided, not emotionally thrown off when someone shifts. They expect it. They account for it. They use it. And the ones who don't keep learning the same lesson over and over again, wondering why it keeps happening to them. Number 3. Here's the part most men avoid admitting. Being nice is not a personality trait. It's a survival strategy you never outgrew. And in the adult world, that strategy turns you into something very specific. Useful. Not respected. Not feared. Not remembered. Just useful. The guy people call when they need something done. The one who doesn't push back. Doesn't complicate things. Doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. On the surface, that sounds like a good man. In reality, it's a man who's been figured out. Run a quick mental check. Not the version you tell people, the honest one. Think about someone you genuinely respect. Not someone you like. Not someone who's easy to be around, but someone whose presence changes the room. Now look closely at how they operate. They're not soft. They don't rush to agree. They don't cushion every sentence to protect feelings. In fact, there's something about them that creates a slight tension, because you know they'll say what others won't. And that tension, that edge, that's where respect is built. Now flip it. Think about the nice guy in your circle, the one who agrees with everything, laughs at everything, adapts to everyone. You enjoy his company, sure, but you don't measure yourself against him. You don't take his opinions seriously. And if we're being honest, you don't fear losing his respect because you know he'll tolerate almost anything. That's the difference. Liking someone is easy. Respecting them requires friction. This plays out in real time, every day, in ways most men ignore. You're at work, there's extra pressure, more tasks than people. Watch who gets picked. It's never the man with boundaries. It's the one who says, yeah, no problem, before he even processes what he's agreeing to. He tells himself he's being reliable, dependable, but what's actually happening is simpler. He's the easiest to load. No resistance. No consequence. So the weight keeps getting added. Then there's the meeting. You start speaking. Someone cuts across you mid-sentence. And you stop. You let them finish. You wait for a gap that never comes. Later, you replay it in your head, thinking of what you should have said, how you should have handled it. But in the moment, you defaulted to staying agreeable. That's not politeness. That's hesitation being mistaken for virtue. Meanwhile, there's always one man in the room who doesn't play that game. He gets interrupted, and he cuts straight back in. Not louder, not emotional, just firm, like it was never a question whether he'd continue. He doesn't ask for space, he takes it. And because of that, people adjust around him. Not because they like him more, but because they register, consciously or not, that there's a line there. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this dynamic long before modern culture tried to soften it. What works in one phase of life becomes a liability in another. Being agreeable kept you safe as a child. As a man, it makes you invisible. Truth, on the other hand, especially uncomfortable truth, carries weight. It signals that you're not negotiating your position based on how others feel in the moment. And here's the internal conflict most men wrestle with. You don't want to be seen as difficult, rude, confrontational. So you dilute what you say. You add, maybe, I think, just small words that seem harmless, but strip authority from your voice. You soften the edges until there's nothing left to push against. And then you wonder why no one takes your words seriously. The shift is brutal in its simplicity. You stop editing yourself to be accepted and start stating things as they are. You tell your boss, calmly, that something won't work. You tell your friend, directly, that they're out of line. No performance, no aggression, just clarity. Some people won't like it, that's the cost. But they will register it. And over time, that registration turns into something far more valuable than being liked. Because the world doesn't reward men who are easy to deal with. It rewards men who are clear, grounded, and unwilling to bend every time there's pressure. Say what's true without dressing it up, and let people decide what to do with it. Number 4. Let's expose the real prison, because it's not where you think it is. It's not your job, not your routine, not your circumstances. It's the silent addiction to approval that's running through everything you do. And the worst part is, it doesn't feel like a prison. It feels like being a good guy. It feels like being reasonable, adaptable, easy to deal with. But if you look closer, without lying to yourself, you'll see the pattern. You're not choosing your actions, you're calculating reactions. Watch yourself through a normal day, almost like you're observing someone else. That forced laugh at a joke that wasn't even close to funny, not because you found it amusing, but because you didn't want to break the social rhythm. That outfit you wore, not because it felt like you, but because it wouldn't raise eyebrows. That, yeah, I'm in, to plans you had zero interest in, just to avoid the slight tension of saying no. These aren't isolated moments, they're signals. Signals that your behavior is being filtered through one question over and over again. How will this be received? And that question slowly erases you. Every time you edit what you really think, every time you suppress a reaction, every time you adjust your tone to be more acceptable, you move a little further away from yourself. Not dramatically, not in a way that alarms you. It's subtle, gradual. Until one day you realize something's off. You're living a life that technically works, but doesn't feel like it belongs to you. You've become efficient at navigating people, but disconnected from your own direction. Here's the part that most men avoid facing. You're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of disapproval. That's the real driver. Not losing, but being judged while you try. Not conflict itself, but the shift in how people might see you if you stop playing along, so you stay within invisible boundaries, not because they're real, but because crossing them comes with emotional friction you've been trained to avoid. And the longer you operate like this, the more dangerous it becomes, because you start mistaking performance for identity. You think this version of you, the agreeable one, the easy one, the one who doesn't disrupt anything, is who you are. It's not. It's who you became to maintain acceptance. There's a difference, and it's a brutal one when you finally see it. Real freedom isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's precise. It's the ability to say exactly what you think, even when your voice isn't completely steady. It's choosing actions based on alignment, not approval. It's saying no without building a speech around it. And that sounds simple until you actually do it. Because the moment you stop performing, the reactions come in. People get confused. Some get irritated. Others start testing you, pushing slightly harder than before, just to see if this version of you is real or temporary. And some quietly distance themselves. Not because you did something wrong, but because you're no longer as easy to use. That's where most men fold. They interpret that friction as a mistake and revert back to what's familiar, back to being agreeable, predictable, safe. But if you hold the line, something shifts. The same people who resisted you start recalibrating. The dynamic changes, not overnight, but consistently, because you're no longer negotiating your behavior based on their comfort. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote about power in a way most people still don't fully grasp. It's not about controlling others directly, it's about removing the need to seek permission from them. The moment you stop chasing approval, you become harder to control. Not louder, not aggressive, just unmoved. And here's the question that cuts through everything. If there was no social consequence, no judgment, no shift in how people see you, what would you actually do differently today? Not in theory, specifically. Because that answer, that version of you, is still there, buried under layers of adjustment and compromise. The problem isn't that you don't know who you are. It's that you've been trained to ignore him. And every day you keep choosing comfort over truth. You keep him buried. Number 5, there's a moment in every room that most men miss. A subtle shift where control is decided without a word being spoken. It's not about who talks the most, or who's the funniest, or even who holds the highest position. It's about who is least affected by the atmosphere, who isn't rushing to smooth things over, who doesn't feel the need to rescue the room from tension. That man, whether people realize it or not, sets the tone. Watch it carefully next time. Someone cracks a weak joke. Most people laugh instantly, not because it's funny, but because silence feels dangerous to them. It exposes something, so they fill it. But there's always one man who doesn't react. He just looks neutral, almost unreadable. And that tiny refusal to play along creates a shift. Suddenly, the joke feels weaker. The energy changes. People become aware. That's not coincidence. That's control through non-compliance. Most men are deeply uncomfortable with discomfort. They've been trained to fix it immediately, to fill pauses, to ease tension, to keep everything socially safe. A conversation dips, they jump in. Someone feels awkward, they soften it. There's a disagreement, they dilute their position to keep harmony. And they call that social intelligence. It's not. It's emotional servitude. You're managing other people's internal states like it's your responsibility. And in doing that, you surrender your position. Now contrast that with a man who doesn't carry that burden. He lets silence stretch without rushing to patch it. He doesn't laugh on cue. He doesn't soften his words to protect fragile reactions. If something is off, he lets it be off. If tension appears, he doesn't panic. He observes it. And that alone makes people recalibrate around him. Because most individuals are constantly scanning the room for cues on how to behave. And when they find someone who isn't reacting the way they expect, they start adjusting to him instead. Niccolò Machiavelli pointed to this indirectly. People follow certainty, not morality, not fairness. Certainty. And certainty, in real life, doesn't look loud or aggressive. It looks like someone who is completely at ease with tension, with silence, with not being liked in the moment. That's rare, and rarity creates gravity. Picture this. You're in a meeting, someone proposes something that clearly won't work. You see it immediately. Most people do, but they nod anyway. They say things like interesting, or we can explore that. Because challenging it introduces friction, and they want to avoid that at all costs. Then one man speaks, calm, direct. That won't work. No apology. No smile to soften it. Just a statement, followed by a reason. The room tightens for a second, then stabilizes. And from that point on, everyone listens to him differently. Not because he was nice, because he was certain. Or you're at dinner, conversation drifts into something uncomfortable. Maybe a truth no one wants to acknowledge. You can feel the shift. People start fidgeting. Someone tries to change the subject. That's the default escape. But the man who holds the frame doesn't move. He maintains eye contact, lets the silence breathe, doesn't rush to rescue anyone from what they're feeling. And slowly, the discomfort stops being something to escape and becomes something everyone sits in. That man didn't dominate by force. He dominated by refusing to retreat. That's what most people don't understand. Dominance isn't about overpowering others. It's about not being controlled by the same pressures that control them. When you stop reacting to discomfort the way everyone else does, you become the reference point. People start watching you, measuring themselves against your reactions, adjusting their behavior to match your energy. And that's where the shift happens. You're no longer the one trying to fit into the room. The room starts adjusting to you. Number 6. Most men walk into a room already defeated. Not physically, but psychologically. You can see it in the way they scan the environment, measuring tone, adjusting posture, calibrating their words before they even speak. The question running in the background is always the same: how do I fit in here? And that question alone gives away their position. Because the moment you try to fit in, you've already accepted someone else's frame as dominant. What almost no one tells you is that every interaction is a silent negotiation of reality, not opinions. Reality itself, what's acceptable, what's normal, what gets ignored, what gets challenged. And beneath the surface, there's always a clash happening. Whose version of reality is going to lead? Most people don't even realize they're playing this game, which is exactly why they lose it. Frame control is simple in concept, brutal in execution. Your standards don't bend to accommodate the room. The room bends around your standards. That's it. But to do that, you have to let go of something most men cling to: the need to be understood, liked, or approved of in real time. Watch how this plays out in small moments, because that's where it's decided. Someone tries to push you into something you don't want. Maybe it's a favor, maybe it's a plan, maybe it's pressure disguised as expectation. The conditioned response is immediate: you soften it, you explain. You justify your no like you owe them clarity. But the explanation isn't for them, it's for your own discomfort. You're trying to make your boundary easier to accept. A man with frame doesn't do that. He says no and leaves it there. No tension management, no performance. And that silence forces the other person to adjust or walk away. Another moment, someone shows up late. Again, you feel it, that slight irritation, that signal that something's off. But instead of addressing it, you neutralize it. No worries. It's fine. Even though it's not. You tell yourself you're being easygoing. What you're actually doing is lowering your own standard in real time. And people register that immediately, not consciously, but they feel it. Now compare that to the man who looks at them and says, calm, direct, "You're late." Don't make it a habit. No emotion, no escalation, just a boundary stated like fact. That line stays in the room long after it's said. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something most modern advice ignores. Power isn't about forcing outcomes, it's about setting conditions where others adjust themselves. And frame is exactly that. When your frame is strong, you don't convince people, they align, often without realizing it. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Holding a frame means you stop managing how people feel about you. You stop cushioning your words to protect reactions. You stop participating in conversations that drain you just to be polite. Someone starts gossiping. Instead of engaging out of habit, you disengage. No explanation, no fake interest, just absence. And that absence speaks louder than anything you could have said. At first, people test it. They push slightly, try to pull you back into the old version of you, the agreeable one, the responsive one, the easy one. And if you break once, they know the frame isn't real. But if you hold it consistently, something shifts. You stop being just another voice filling space and become the reference point people measure themselves against. They start watching how you react before deciding how they should. They start adjusting their tone, their timing, their behavior, not because you demanded it, but because your reality feels more stable than theirs. And that's the difference. Most men enter other people's worlds and try to survive inside them. The few who understand this make others step into theirs. Number 7. Here's where the shift becomes uncomfortable because it forces you to confront something you've been doing your entire life without noticing. The constant need to be validated, not openly, not in an obvious way, but in subtle checks, small calibrations, quiet questions running in the background of your behavior. Was that good? Did they like that? Did I say the right thing? It's constant. And it's draining more power from you than anything else. Most men don't realize how exposed they are the moment they start seeking approval. Because the second your sense of worth depends on someone else's reaction, you've handed them control. Not partially, completely. They don't need to dominate you, they don't need to confront you, they just need to withhold validation. And you'll adjust yourself automatically. You've seen it play out, maybe you've lived it without calling it what it is. You send a message, and then you check your phone, again and again. Not because it matters logically, but because there's a part of you waiting, measuring your value through a response. Or you say something in a group, and immediately scan faces, looking for signs of approval, nods, smiles, reactions. That split second right after you speak, that's where your position is revealed. Not in what you said, but in what you're waiting for. And here's the part that cuts deeper. People can feel it. They might not articulate it, but they register it instantly. The man who needs approval moves differently. Slight hesitation before speaking. Slight adjustment in tone depending on who's listening. Slight over-explanation to make sure he's understood. It's subtle, but it signals something very clear. This man is negotiable. Now compare that to someone who operates from a completely different place. He says what he thinks and moves on. No scan. No check. No need for confirmation. If there's silence, he lets it sit. If there's disagreement, he engages it directly. Not emotionally, just clean, direct confrontation. There's no internal collapse when someone doesn't agree with him, because his position wasn't built on their approval to begin with. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this at a level most men never reach. Status isn't granted by titles, it's reinforced by behavior. A man doesn't become valuable because others say he is. Others start saying he is because he already operates like he is. That's the order, and most men get it backwards. You've been taught, indirectly, to wait, to earn approval first, then act with confidence. But it doesn't work that way. The approval never comes in a way that satisfies you, because the moment you get it, you need more. It becomes a loop, a dependency. And like any dependency, it weakens you. There's a moment where this becomes clear, and it's usually not dramatic. It's quiet. You realize you've been adjusting yourself for people who haven't even earned a place in your life. You've been filtering your thoughts, softening your words, holding back your position, not because it was right, but because it was safer. And in doing that, you've been slowly lowering your own standard. Strong men don't do that. They don't look around to decide how to act. They decide first, then let the room react. If there's conflict, they step into it. No passive aggression, no indirect signals, just clarity. If something needs to be said, it's said. If a boundary needs to be set, it's set. No performance, no apology layered over it. And the most misunderstood part, they don't sacrifice their position to maintain comfort. Not theirs, not yours. If something is off, they address it. If they disagree, they say it. If they're not interested, they don't pretend. That's not arrogance. That's alignment, and alignment carries weight. Here's the paradox most people never grasp. The moment you stop chasing approval, people start offering it. Not because you asked, but because it's no longer available on demand. Scarcity changes perception. When your validation isn't easily accessible, it becomes something others start working for. So the shift is simple, but not easy. You stop asking if you're good enough. You remove that question entirely, and you move as if the answer was already decided. Number 8. There's a pattern you've probably felt but never fully named. The moment you stop giving, everything around you shifts. Not gradually, not subtly, instantly. The tone changes, the energy tightens. The same people who once praised you start questioning you. And if you're not paying attention, you'll misread it. You'll think you did something wrong. You didn't. You just disrupted an arrangement that was quietly benefiting them. Most relationships aren't built on fairness. They're built on advantage. That's the part no one says out loud. People don't consciously sit there plotting to use you. It's more automatic than that. They notice what they can get from you, what you tolerate, how far they can push, and then they settle into that pattern. And if you've spent years being agreeable, accommodating, always available, you've trained them perfectly. Think about that friend who used to call you every time something went wrong in their life. You listened, gave advice, showed up, made time. No matter what. It felt like loyalty. It felt like connection. Then one day you don't pick up, or you tell them you're busy. And suddenly there's a shift. A comment, maybe subtle at first, "You've been different lately." That's not concern, that's resistance. Because the role you used to play, the one that benefited them, is no longer guaranteed. Or the workplace version. You're the one who always steps in, covers gaps, fixes problems that aren't yours. At first, it's appreciated. You're seen as reliable, valuable. But over time, something changes. It stops being appreciated and starts being expected. So when you finally say no, when you stop absorbing responsibilities that were never yours, you're not seen as setting a boundary. You're seen as a problem. You're not a team player. Not because you changed, but because the dynamic did. And the most uncomfortable one, family. The place where roles get locked in early and rarely questioned. You're the one who hosts, who organizes, who keeps things smooth. It becomes part of your identity, until you decide not to. And when you step back, when you stop carrying that weight, the reaction isn't gratitude for what you've done. It's pressure, guilt, labels. You've changed. You've become selfish. No, you've just stopped overextending yourself. Niccolò Machiavelli saw this dynamic clearly. People don't respond to morality the way they claim to, they respond to benefit. As long as your presence serves them, you're valued. The moment it doesn't, that value is questioned. Not always openly, not always aggressively, but it's there. Here's where most men collapse. They try to negotiate their boundaries. They explain them, justify them, soften them so they're easier to accept. But that defeats the entire point. A boundary that needs approval isn't a boundary. It's a request, and requests can be denied. The shift is simple, but it requires something most men aren't used to: holding the line without explanation. You say no, and you let the discomfort sit. You don't rush to fix their reaction. You don't dilute your position to make it easier for them to accept. You let them deal with it, because their frustration isn't a sign you're wrong, it's a sign the dynamic is changing. And here's the part that reframes everything. When someone reacts negatively to your boundaries, they're not reacting to the boundary itself. They're reacting to the loss of access. Access to your time, your energy, your compliance. That's what's actually being taken away. Being agreeable didn't make you a good man. It made you available. And availability, without limits, invites exploitation. Not always malicious, but consistent. The men who understand this don't try to be fair in every interaction. They try to be clear about what they allow, what they don't, what they tolerate, what they walk away from. And that clarity filters people quickly. Some leave, some resist, but the ones who stay adjust. Because once access is no longer guaranteed, it becomes something people value differently. Number 9, there's a quiet mistake most men make that completely destroys their leverage. They give approval too easily. Not in obvious ways, but in constant microsignals. Quick compliments, instant replies, automatic agreement, nodding along just to keep things smooth. It feels harmless. It feels social. But what you're actually doing is lowering the value of your attention in real time. Watch how people behave when approval is abundant. They don't respect it, they expect it. The guy who praises everything you do, who reacts to every message instantly, who validates every opinion, his approval becomes background noise. It carries no weight, no tension, no consequence. You don't try harder around him. You don't measure yourself against him. You don't care if he approves, because you already know he will. Now flip that dynamic. Think about someone whose approval is rare, not because they're cold for the sake of it, but because they don't hand it out without reason. When they say something is good, you feel it differently. It lands. You replay it, not because the words are special, but because they're scarce, and scarcity changes perception more than quality ever could. This is where most men get uncomfortable, because withholding approval feels wrong at first. It goes against everything you've been taught about being likable, supportive, easy to be around. You feel the urge to fill the gap, to affirm, to keep the interaction smooth. But that urge is exactly what keeps you in a lower position, constantly giving, rarely being pursued. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that value is never just about what something is. It's about how available it is. And attention, validation, approval, they follow the same rule. The more accessible they are, the less they matter. The harder they are to earn, the more they're pursued. Look at how this plays out in real situations. Someone shows you something they've done, most people react immediately. That's great. Looks good. Automatic. No filter. But a man who understands this pauses. He looks, he actually evaluates, and if it's average, he says nothing or gives a minimal response. Not to be harsh, but because he refuses to reward mediocrity, and that silence creates pressure. It forces the other person to reassess, to wonder, to adjust, or take communication. Most men are predictable. They respond instantly, every time, like their attention is always available. And without realizing it, they train people to expect it. So when they delay, it feels like something's wrong. But the man who controls his availability, who doesn't respond on impulse, who engages on his own time, shifts that dynamic completely. His attention becomes something to earn, not something guaranteed. And here's where it becomes power, not loud, not aggressive, but gravitational. People start adjusting around you. They put more effort into what they say, how they act, how they present themselves, because they're not sure how you'll respond. That uncertainty creates focus, and that focus turns into respect. But this only works if it's real. If you fake it, people feel it immediately. This isn't about playing games. It's about removing unnecessary validation from your behavior. You stop rewarding things that don't deserve it. You stop reacting out of habit. You stop filling silence just to keep things comfortable. Instead, your approval becomes precise, controlled, intentional. A slight nod when something is genuinely solid. A brief acknowledgement when it's earned. Nothing exaggerated, nothing performative. And because of that, it means more. Most men are trying to be liked by giving more. More attention, more validation, more approval, and they end up diluted, replaceable. The shift is the opposite. You give less, but you mean it. And in that restraint, your presence starts carrying weight. Because when approval isn't freely available, people start working for it. Number 10. This is the part most men resist, because it forces you to let go of the need to be liked. And once you see it clearly, you can't go back to pretending. Respect is not built on warmth, it's not built on friendliness, and it's definitely not built on how agreeable you are. Respect is built on consequence. Not loud, not violent, but real. The kind people feel before they decide how to act around you. Think about it carefully. The people who adjust their behavior in your presence, who watch what they say, who don't cross certain lines, they're not doing that because they like you more. They're doing it because something in them recognizes a boundary they don't want to test. Not fear of harm, but fear of losing position with you. Fear of stepping out of line and being cut off, corrected, or dismissed without hesitation. And if that's not happening in your life, then you're not being respected, you're being managed. You've seen the opposite play out. The guy everyone likes. Easy to talk to, always available, always understanding. People joke around him, interrupt him, cancel on him last minute, push his time around like it has no weight. Not because they hate him, but because there's no cost, no consequence. His approval is guaranteed, his presence is predictable, his boundaries are flexible. So people take liberties, constantly. Now contrast that with the man who doesn't tolerate that behavior. Not aggressively, just consistently. Someone crosses a line, he addresses it immediately. No delay, no build-up, no emotional outburst, just clarity. That doesn't work for me. And if it happens again, he acts. He withdraws access. He removes himself. No speech, no drama. And that's what lands. Not the words, the action. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something most men are too uncomfortable to accept. People don't follow those they like the most. They follow those whose disapproval carries weight. Because approval feels good, but disapproval creates tension, and tension drives behavior. This doesn't mean you become hostile or cold for no reason. It means you become precise. You don't let things slide just to keep peace. You don't ignore disrespect to avoid discomfort. You don't tolerate patterns that go against your standard. And more importantly, you don't negotiate those standards once they're set. There's a moment where this becomes real, and it's usually quiet. Someone tests you, maybe they cancel last minute, maybe they speak out of line, maybe they assume you'll adjust like you always have. And instead of reacting the old way, you hold your ground. No explanation, no justification, just a shift in behavior. You don't chase, you don't fix, you don't smooth it over. You let the distance exist. That's where the recalibration begins. Because now there's something at stake. Your presence is no longer guaranteed. Your approval is no longer automatic. And that creates a different kind of respect, not based on comfort, but on awareness. Awareness that there's a line, and crossing it has a cost. Most men avoid this because they associate it with being disliked. But here's the reality. Being liked by everyone is a sign you're not taken seriously by anyone. Respect requires a level of tension. It requires that some people don't fully relax around you because they know you won't bend to accommodate everything. And once you operate like this consistently, something changes. You don't need to demand respect. You don't need to explain yourself. It becomes understood. People adjust faster, speak more carefully, act more deliberately. Not because you asked, but because they've learned. Now step back and look at the full picture. Every pattern you've been following, every adjustment you've been making, every moment you chose comfort over truth, it all leads to the same place. A version of you that's easy to deal with and easy to overlook. Or a different version, one that holds standards, controls access, speaks directly, and doesn't collapse under social pressure. Not louder, not aggressive, just unmovable. That's the line in front of you, not theoretical, real. One path keeps you acceptable. The other makes you respected.